Welcome to this latest edition of Leading with Purpose. We've got a really interesting recording today with Matthew Kelsall, who's CEO of Clyde Co, a huge law firm, global law firm, but also Kate Mathias, who's CPO. So I think aside from going through their own journeys and if you like the opportunities within the legal sector Clyde Co is doing, I think having Kate on this podcast is actually a brilliant way to get across that there are lots of careers within all firms, including law firms, that aren't actually about being a lawyer. But anyway, Matthew, why don't we kick off? First of all, thanks to both of you for being part of the podcast today. But Matthew, why don't you tell people a little bit more about Clyde & Co and what it's all about as a law firm? It's a huge business, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. Well, good morning, and yeah, thank you for allowing us to do this. So, Clyde's, we're an international law firm. We've got around about 5,500 people now spread across 70 offices, around about 70 offices all over the globe, and getting on for 500 partners. So it's a significant business which has got a presence in all of the major economies of the world. It's a business that was founded principally around the London shipping and insurance market. So whilst a lot of people wouldn't necessarily have heard of Clyde & Co, we tend to be involved in big world insurance events, which tend to be, a lot of them tend to be sort of catastrophic events like plane crashes, ship sinking, those sorts of things. But increasingly, as the business has grown and evolved and it's become internationalized, certainly over the last 25 years, it's a very big, varied law firm. So we're built around sectors. We do a lot of work in energy, particularly energy transition, commodities, marine and aviation are part of our core DNA. But the firm was founded out of London, but now is very much an international player. We don't really consider ourselves to be a London law firm anymore. And as I said, 5,500 people and just over $1 billion turnover. So it's quite a big, complex business.
It's a huge footprint, and we're really proud to have you part of all of our social mobility work that we're doing as well. And I guess, Kate, perhaps, just explain your own role as well as CPO. A lot of people might have heard of that role title, but just so that people get a sense of what that means for you.
Sure. Thanks, Justine. And it's great. Yeah, great to be with you. So I'm the Chief People Officer at Clyde & Co, which means that I look after the HR function and really all of our talent and people management practices. So all the way through the employee life cycle, from attraction and hiring, development and learning, promotion, career progression, looking at our engagement and the experience that our employees have with us, and then obviously clearly our DE&I practices as well. So I run a team of about 200 people across the globe who are a fantastic cohort of individuals, very passionate about what we do, looking after all of those matters for the firm.
And I think it's such a good example of how you can have one organisation, but it genuinely takes a team of people to run it, with quite different skills. And, I guess, coming back to you, Kate, was there a moment when you kind of thought, actually, I think it's the people side of things that really appeals to me and I'm going to go down that route? Or was your journey into this part of business, in a sense, a bit more of a roundabout one?
I would say a bit of both, actually. So one of the things that I'm passionate about is around access to understanding about careers. And, where I come from, I was the first person in my UK family to go to university and really came out of university without a clue about how you access jobs, what jobs are available, what might be, what might be an interesting career. And actually, after I came back from traveling, I was in the job centre looking in the big book of jobs. And there was one that was around human resources that said, this is about working with people. And I thought, well, that might be a career for me. So that's actually how I first heard about HR. But I actually went in through a slightly different route. So I started off working in recruitment and then quite quickly got into management consultancy and built my career at Deloitte in the human capital consulting practice, and was there for about 10 years. And that's where I still say I'm a management consultant by trade, learned about the different, and actually had insight then into lots of different businesses, how they run, the different sorts of careers and opportunities that are available, which is nothing that you would imagine, I think, as a young person without any insight into that. And then, came out of consulting, and then got the call from Clyde Co. So that's how I sort of ended up in this position. Obviously, delighted to be continuing to build my career in an exciting firm.
Brilliant. And I think it just shows that it's hard to find out about opportunities until you sort of get into your career sometimes. I think that was certainly the case for me. And Matthew, for you, you're obviously running the law firm overall, which is, so it's not just about being a lawyer, as it were, you're a CEO too. Tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, I remember being at university with people who are on the law course, and we did one little module in my business economics degree, and I found it completely confusing, if I'm absolutely honest. I don't know whether my brain worked the right way for law, although I am very good at arguing debating. Maybe on another token I would have been good at it. I don't know. But your journey, are you a qualified lawyer? Do you think you need to be CEO?
No, so I come from the other side of professional services. So actually, I trained and qualified as an accountant, and then I qualified in I think it was 99 or 2000, and then made the break out of professional services. I left professional services. I went to work for Halliburton, a big oilfield services company.
Yeah.
Then, because I'd grown up in the Middle East, I had a lot of experience in the Middle East, and that fitted quite well with what they were doing at the time. And then I got the call, from a headhunter to come and talk to Clyde Co. And I thought I didn't really want all of that time. That was 2007. And I thought, well, I didn't want to go back into professional services, and I certainly had no particular interest in going to work for a law firm, which I considered to be quite sort of stuffy and staid. But I took the meeting out of idle interest, and here I am 18 years later. And it couldn't have been any different to mine. It was interesting. It was my misconceptions about the nature of the industry at the time, and particularly when I thought law firm insurance, it didn't sound, and at the time I was spending an awful lot of time in all over the Middle East, visiting oilfield services, drilling sites, and those sorts of things. It seemed to be a little bit of a change of pace that wouldn't necessarily have held huge amounts of opportunity for me. But no, I mean, it's been, for me, the whole journey at Clyde & Co has been about opportunity, because since I've been at the firm, I've went back to the Middle East, lived in the Middle East, and then in Singapore, and then in the US, and then back to London. So the firm's created opportunities for myself, my family, to travel all over the world and experience those cultures. It's been a real journey. It's been nothing. I suppose at the time I was probably the embodiment of some of the brand problems that the legal industry had. But actually, my experience couldn't have been any different. It's been quite a journey for the last 18 years.
And I think it's interesting that both of you have clearly had, very successful careers, but actually you've been at a business that you've really been able to develop yourself and your career at. So Matthew, it's probably worth, I'll bring you in shortly, Kate, just talking a little bit about some of the work. Obviously Clyde is part of the social mobility work that we're doing, which is brilliant. Talk about some of the stuff that you're doing to remove those barriers. And so, that next generation of people in the business can make their way too.
Yeah, I was reflecting on this actually when we were preparing for talking to you today. And this is one of the earliest insights I had was when I'd moved. It was 2008. I moved with Clyde to Dubai, and at the time, then as we are now, we were the largest international law firm in the Middle East, and we were training our lawyers to become partners using a very London-centric, London-focused way, that sort of cookie-cutter way that law firms would train people. So we had, as you'd expect in the Middle East, we had lawyers from Lebanon, from Jordan, from Egypt.
Yep.
And they were struggling to move up our system because they were failing or struggling with English verbal reasoning tests, or they were being flown to London and asked to work a cocktail party, which was the way, if you can believe it or not, back in the early 2000s, that's how you used to score the quality or the potential of lawyers. And it struck me then that we were we were cutting ourselves off to the vast majority of the supply of the labour force in the region there, and we totally tipped on its head the way that we would train and develop our lawyers there. And really, that's probably been the starting point for me. So firstly, I think wherever I've gone in the world, and including now back in the UK, being able to access all of the economy, all the potential of the economy and the population, I think is absolutely essential, particularly if you're going to lay down roots.
Sorry to interrupt, but it was really interesting. So what did you do then in the region to switch it round? You said you totally changed it.
Yeah, we developed an in-region training program. We called it. It was called at the time. It was called "Making Rain in the Desert." It was the idea of how you actually develop client relationships, a business, and a career from the Middle East out, rather than from London in. Yeah. And it knocked away some of those sort of more London focused. How do you work a room? How do you solve complex questions using English as opposed to complex questions using Arabic, which is what, of course, a lot of these guys were doing on a day-to-day basis. And now Kate can talk more about this, we've now got much more of it's very much an internationalized program for how we develop our lawyers. But what was at the heart of that to me was the expatriates at the time, certainly legal qualified expatriates from the West, probably were a single-digit percentage of the population, certainly in Dubai. So we were definitely, it was 100% of the effort on a very tiny percentage of the population, and I just went to inverse that so that we were able to tap pools of potential from all of the population there. And if you look at the makeup of our business there now, and we followed that logic as well across Asia. So the businesses we've got, the people, the makeup of the partnership and the workforce in each of those locations now is much more reflective of where the geography is, where they are. And that's been really important. A lot of that's just about creating opportunity. It's how you get people to stay at the firm. Yeah. It's about creating that opportunity, and they can see the career paths available to everybody, not just to people who are sort of London trained or New York trained.
And I guess, you brought that ethos, now to a more strategic level as CEO, and in a sense took also that practical learning, I suppose, that you had during that time in the Middle East, to a wider version of Clyde Co.
Yeah, and I think it's fortunate because as our approach has changed, the industry has changed, and obviously you would have seen this through your career, that I think we've moved from access to law used to be difficult because the general population didn't understand law firms. Law firms were expensive, they were difficult to engage, and lots of a push towards making the law more accessible. And I think, and then accessibility of the law, being able to understand what lawyers do. There's lots of changes certainly in the UK to make it easier for people to gain access to the law. But I think now that the next turn of that wheel, the evolution, has been access to careers in law, which has moved from you had to have gone to a Ivy League, Russell Group university and trained through a major centre like a London or a New York to being you don't have to be a lawyer to have a career in a law firm. And I'm very much the epitome of that.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to all of that time, the experience in the Middle East. It's the sort of getting in versus getting on, and recognising that, they're related, but ultimately they are two quite distinct challenges, actually. And I guess for you, Kate, that whole getting in, getting on piece, the pathways that you're creating for Clyde, that's at the core of what you probably spend an awful lot of your time thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first two pillars of our 4-pillar people strategy, the first one is high performance careers for the long term, i.e. we want people to stay with us and be able to stay with us for the long term, and to be productive and successful while they're with us. And the second one is the opportunity to thrive for everyone, which I think, embodies what Matthew was just talking about there, which is law has always offered great opportunities for great careers, but hasn't always been particularly equal in how it's done that, and hasn't always been particularly representative throughout all the stages of people's careers. So yeah, our job is to look at how are we helping people to be successful while they're here, how are we looking at increasing representation through our recruitment and attraction channels, but how do we keep people, and how do we make sure that they have the same experience as everybody else. So the same access to promotions, the same access to mentorship, the same access to sponsorship throughout that. Because as we know, those of us who spent more time in business, those things are really important for actually having productive, successful, long-term careers.
And what are some of the things for you that you've put in place that you feel have really worked, that have absolutely made sure that wherever you are in Clyde, there's a career path ahead of you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll talk maybe about some of the early careers interventions and the different pathways into law, because I think we've got some fantastic stories there. So we have a number of access programs that give people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds insights into what it's like to work in a law firm. So our Lift program, which I know you're aware of, because we were very proud to win, one of our. I'm very grateful to win one of your prizes and recognition in the right advice and experience. So Lift is legal insight for future talent. So it's really making sure that we provide accessible routes, paid above the living wage, with technology provided for the program, so that people can see what it's like to work in the law sector and understand whether a career would be right for them. We also have introduced solicitor apprenticeship programs, administrator apprenticeship programs. And another initiative that we're super proud of is our Paralegal Academy. So that's predominantly based in Manchester and the Northwest, but looking at how people can access law via a paralegal qualification route. And again, that's been very successful in terms of engagement, attraction, and sort of our brand in that market. So that's some of the things that we're looking at in terms of entry. And then in terms of how do we keep people in the firm, I think there's a couple of different aspects that I would draw attention to here. One is looking at differentiated career pathways. So we've recently in some of our markets introduced a different form of partnership, so a salaried partnership, to try and get people who at different parts of their careers in different markets to be able to stay with the firm and feel and be successful and share in the commercial success. And our other big initiative.
And it might be worth just explaining to people how that's different maybe from the alternative ways that you can become a partner.
Sure. So the traditional route to partnership is through equity partnership, where you put money into the business and you're paid in particular ways, and that's the normal. And that was the very traditional path towards becoming a very senior leader within a law firm. That's what most law firms.
So you literally get a chance, because I think most people don't understand how law partnerships, as it were, work. You get a chance to buy a bit of the firm as a partner, and then when the firm does well, you essentially that's how you get a bit of the profits.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Matthew, I don't know if you would add anything there. I mean, obviously the standards and the criteria for becoming a partner have evolved in law firms over the years, and I think those the requirements, in particularly in terms of commercial success, have become more significant in most law firms over the past 20 years or so. But Matthew, I don't know if there's anything you'd add on.
I mean, the principle, different firms do it differently, but the fundamental principles are just as you described. It's about, you get the opportunity, you rise to the top, and then you exchange money for a share in the firm, and then you get a share of the profits of the firm. It's a well trodden path. I think a lot of the bigger, we're a big law firm. A lot of the you see with the big four, a lot of the huge certainly US law firms move more to a smaller equity partner structure, and then it gets a bit confusing below that level. But for us, I think the opening up another avenue to partnership meant that, particularly in the UK, where our business has evolved. So we were just London and given the home counties. We're now, as Kate says, we're very significant in Manchester and in Scotland as well. Just where the economics of the type of businesses we run are different. We decided that we weren't going to have a single one size fits all route through to partnership that would be probably not achievable for lots of people who sat outside those majors, like London certainly. So opening up that as an opportunity, as a career path, means people can see they can stay at the firm, they can reach partnership. We've just tried to add some flexibility there into our structure.
And it's very, very sensible, and in its own way, absolutely part of opening up that very top bit of the career architecture for people. But before we come on to some of this leadership stuff that you were touching on in a way, Matthew, Kate, do you want to talk a little bit about, because there's two bits of this. One is almost building this structure, isn't it? That's open, that has the right support in place, the different pathways. But then there's the different thing, which is to make sure there's a really broad group of people from, as you mentioned, different parts of the country who are able to take advantage of it. It's probably worth just quickly touching. I'll bring you in as well on this, I think, Matthew, as well. Just literally some of those regional officers, how they've changed Clyde as well over time, but how you make sure you do get that really different breadth to employees as part of the business, which is so important.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think our, in the UK particularly, our regional footprint is extremely, important to who we are and the different offices that we operate in. We've got a really big presence in Manchester, in key bits of our, significant casualty practice based up there. So it's really important that we have a brand that works. One of the last pillar of our people strategy is called making the most of who we are. And that's about making sure that we make the most of our footprint, of the unique opportunities that we can sell, and our employer brand. So we've done a lot of work in terms of our employer brand. What's the give and the get for working at Clyde? A lot of it, as Matthew's already said, centres around the opportunities that we provide. But one of the key segments that we looked at was our casualty practice during that. So trying to make sure that we've got a really articulate story that we can tell in the markets outside of London or wherever in the world that will be interesting to those people there, so they're not feeling like they're an outpost of a London practice. And Clyde certainly doesn't feel like that in terms of how we make decisions and how we think about what we're doing and the changes that we make. I think it's very representative. I would also say in terms of my function and how we structure some of our business services teams, we service our regional offices the same way that we service our London offices. We have a head of HR for our casualty practice. We have regional coverage. We make sure that we're, I have regional heads of HR for all of our regions. So, we try very hard not to be a centre out organisation. We are thinking and being articulate about the needs of the regions and the different offices within that. As well as trying to obviously work as a global firm and seeing the benefit of being a global firm.
I mean, it's really interesting. And Matthew, I wanted to bring you in on the leadership piece of this, actually, because in the end, Kate as CPO is overseeing that right architecture, people getting in, getting on. But in a way, it's brought to life, isn't it, by the managers, the leaders, the partners, such as both of yourselves, obviously, but a much broader cohort of people who are at Clyde. How do you, in a sense, how have you made sure that those values that you've both talked about, actually, the kind of business that you want? And I think for anyone watching or listening to this, it's so easy, isn't it, to see a company name in a paper or whatever and think it's some kind of, just thing. The reality is it's people. It's a group of people trying to do something. If you're listening to Matthew and Kate, they're two people running a really massive law firm. But actually in doing so, they're putting their own stamp on it of the kind of community, in a way, an organisation they want to create. And so, Matthew, for you, how do you make sure that those values are sort of lived by a much broader group at Clyde? Because I think we all know, any of us who've been in business, it gets busy. You've got clients, demanding clients, there are deadlines. It's kind of making sure it's lived irrespective of those pressures that people are facing day to day.
Yeah, and I think we've done two things I would say we've done two things I think very well. One is really incorporating these principles as part of the culture of the firm. And Kate actually ran a project, I think it was 18 months, 2 years ago, to encapsulate the values of the firm. And one of those is celebrate difference. And it's not just something that we say, it's something that we spend a lot of time talking to all of our people at all levels, from the senior most partners to the junior most non-lawyers in the firm, about what it means to them to work for the firm, and to try and distill that down into those principles and values, which is something you'll see if you go into our offices. You'll see it. It's branded in our offices, but it's obviously that's only the very start of it. It's then about how you conduct yourself. And I think the firm, there's been a real journey, certainly since our new senior partner, I would say she's not a new senior partner, 3.5 years ago, Carolina Gordon became senior partner of Clyde's, first female senior partner, first non-UK based, non-London based. She's based in Montreal. And that was a fantastic opportunity for us, and one that she really helped us grab by the scruff of the neck to say, right, we need to modernise our thinking, we need to modernise our approach, and we really need to encapsulate some of these principles in the DNA of the firm. And I think one thing that's been quite rewarding there is it's not been difficult, because one of the advantages of being spread all over the globe as we are, and with a very diverse client base, is that we're nowhere are we one thing. We're very much it's a very big, complicated. I think, as I said earlier, it's a diverse and complex business. So I think it was quite that part of the journey was quite easy. I think the other thing that we've done, and I do think this is really important, is we've made this a part of our approach to clients, and it's intrinsically linked to the commercial success of the business. Because if we lose talented people because they don't see a career at the firm, or if we can't attract talented people because they think we're just looking for that stereotype of a lawyer, of a London lawyer, a New York lawyer, then we're cutting ourselves off from vast swathes of the economy. And that would have been so counterintuitive to the way our business has grown in the UK, because we have grown in areas outside of London that have struggled for the last 10 or 15 years, but where you've still got a fantastic education system producing people who want to have careers. And I think we've just moved so far away from, in order to get ahead in a law firm, you have to be a lawyer who wants to be a partner, to having just a huge variety of opportunities. But a lot of that's driven by our clients, because not only are clients interested in what we're doing in this space, but also the services that they demand from their law firms are so different now to what they were 15 years ago, that we need to have people specialists, we need to have technologists, we need to have project managers, we need to have people who can develop innovative products and solutions. So I think it's one of the things, I think, certainly in my career at Clyde Co, where you can appeal to the broadest space people in one go, is to talk to them about clients in the firm, because everyone, it's in the DNA of the professional services business. Everyone thinks about clients, whether they're client facing or not, and I saw a stat, I think it was last week, that at the moment our run rate is about 8 out of 10 RFPs, requests for proposals, we get from clients ask us to give substantive, demonstrable proof of the programs we're running, the successes that we're that we're seeing, the targets that we're setting. So,
in relation to being a diverse, broad business that is, supporting social mobility.
Yeah, and I think, again, 5 years ago, I think the debate in the legal industry was probably very much about law firm. We were no different. Law firms are very good at having a good mix of male and female associate sort of non-partner lawyers up to a senior level, and then that tapered off once it came through to partnership. And that's something that we've struggled with, that as a lot of the industry has. But we're Kate can talk about some of the programs that we've put in place there to try and address that. But now it's just much more broad than that. It is about the social mobility aspect, but that's, for us in the UK, is hand in glove with the way our footprint's developed. We are a major employer in Manchester, we're a major employer in Bristol, we're a major employer in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, etc. So it's for us, it's opportunity that follows on from the investment that we've made in the infrastructure and the physical infrastructure we've got across the UK. So it's natural development.
And Kate, did you want to come in on that as well?
I'll pick up on a few of the things that we've done, specifically to try and retain and make sure our representation stays more similar all the way through the life cycle. Firstly, we did actually pull the stats just in service of this, and we subscribe to a platform called Piracle, which benchmarks against other subscribing law firms. It's a really good tool for a lot of things, but includes diversity information. And we're actually, within our peer group, we're actually top for colleagues coming from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, with almost 26% of our people coming where they've declared from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And I think that's just representative of the opportunity the firm does present, as Matthew's outlined. But specifically in terms of female retention, which I think Matthew was talking about in terms of what we see, we don't have a problem with attracting women from all backgrounds into law, but we do have challenge with keeping them. So one of I would say our flagship policy, LifeWorks, is a 26-week full paid parental leave policy for both men and women, and any other routes to parenthood. We also offer within that coaching for people leaving and coming back, coaching for line managers in terms of supporting their people who are going off and coming back, and a number of other aspects to that leave, including neonatal leave and support for fertility treatments and time off for those sorts of things, also time off for pregnancy loss. So that was a flagship program for us, and a real step change for Clyde's in terms of being bold and making choices about these sorts of things before the rest of the market. So law firms, as I say, this is actually my first law firm, and there's a lot of history of law firms sort of watching each other and then making choices to make changes when a number of other firms had already made the choices. And certainly from what I hear from my team is that was typically Clyde's approach in the past. So I arrived at the firm in 2022, and a number of my colleagues started asking me about this, the policy that they had started working on, and whether we should be progressing with it, or whether there was an appetite to continue to develop the proposal. So it was a big change. It was a big policy for anywhere in the market. So I remember, Matthew, I had a conversation with you about whether we should progress with it, whether there would be appetite to do this, whether this was something we could consider, I think, as a policy. And I remember really clearly you said, I think it's a great idea, and we should absolutely try and see if we can build a case for it. So that's what we did. And I think working with a number of our different leader colleagues to try and get a case together that would work for the business. And I certainly consider that to be a huge achievement for us as a firm to be able to put that in place. And obviously there has been a number of other law firms and others in outside of our industry who've taken that forward, and are now emulating and taking the lead. But the reason for doing that was obviously to try and support people to stay with the firm, particularly women, to stay with the firm when they choose to have families, to support working families to be successful, and see Clyde's as a place where careers can continue to be built and aren't incompatible with parenthood.
So it's really interesting, Kate, just to hear about, just how much in reality goes on to make sure Clyde & Co can be this version of the company that both you and Matthew, and as you said, your senior partner and, if you like, that leadership team want. But what's ahead? As Matthew, you've talked quite a lot actually, about how things have changed, say, over the last 5 years. It's interesting, and it always does change, doesn't it? So I guess for the two of you, when you think, what's your vision for where you go next with this? I'll start with you first, Kate, and then perhaps Matthew, we can finish with your thoughts. Where do you go next? What are the challenges that you see coming down the track, but also where are the opportunities that you're thinking you might be able to take advantage of?
Yeah. Look, I think it's a great question, because nothing is finished. We have done some great work, but we've still got a long way to go to be fully representative and to make sure that there's no gap in experience or opportunity for all of our different people. So we revamped our DE&I strategy in last summer, so just almost coming up to a year ago, where we're now moving to a gap to parity model. So we're just trying to reduce the gap to representation based on the markets that we live and work in. Mm-hmm. So we're being more specific and more thoughtful about what we're trying to achieve, and that those are aspirational. Those are aspirational goals that we take steps to make sure that we're working towards them without, leaning on quotas or anything, that doesn't work like that.
The directional and that's why it's powerful for you.
Absolutely, because I think it makes us work harder at making sure that that experience is the same for everyone. So we're also looking at metrics around our engagement surveys. We want the same outturns, nothing statistically significant in terms of gap, in terms of that experience. So we continue to work on that, and all of my teams have a wide set of objectives around recruitment, around the DE&I programs that we run, the groups that we support, to make sure that everybody feels included in the firm. And I think we just have to keep pressing on. We've had great results, but you can't really sit on your you can't sit back and say, okay, we're done. You have to respond to the world in the context of the world as it changes. And but what I have got is a super committed team, and working with the business, as we've already said, we have a lot of passionate people in the business who are equally committed to wanting to move the firm forward and make sure that they're offering and doing the right thing, offering great experiences and doing the right thing by our people. So I think that strategy holds us to account in terms of trying to make sure that we're bringing those gaps to parity down. And the work is, very diverse in terms of different programs.
I think as a business, a law firm, we're in. What do? We manage risk for clients, and I think for us, the legal industry is going through quite a period of change at the moment. Certainly impacted by technology, by AI. And part of just good risk management for us, I think, is making sure that we offer the broadest career opportunities and routes and avenues through for the largest talent pool that we can access. And I think for me, targets are important because I think they're a good way of measuring performance. I think culturally, I think we're in the right direction. But I think that period of change for us going ahead is going to be about how do we stay ahead of some of the changes to the industry by creating those broad-based opportunities for people, and I think that's going to be quite key. And it's probably the largest change the industry's faced. I don't know, the last 100 years or so, and I think getting ahead of that curve and staying ahead of that curve is going to be absolutely essential. And I think it really does complement the social mobility agenda.
It's so great to hear about, almost notwithstanding how much has already happened at Clyde Co, to get a sense almost of what that forward look looks like. So I really just wanted to say Matthew Kelsall and Kate Mathias, both of Clyde Co, a massive thank you for the podcast today. I think it's been an absolutely brilliant podcast. And I hope that people have learned not only just how much Clyde is doing on social mobility and really being open to that diverse talent pool that's out there, but also this sense that you don't have to be a lawyer to work in the legal services sector. And actually, there are some brilliant careers, as both Matthew and Kate very personally demonstrate, that can happen if you want to get more involved. So I hope that's been a fantastic podcast. And once again, Matthew and Kate, thank you so much for being part of it.
Thank you, Justine. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it's been great to spend time together this morning. Thanks.